to take a hard look in the mirror and practice self-awareness. And I think it's awareness of oneself as well as your organization. And I'd say what I learned, or I realized, is I'm both a rescuer and a pleaser. And our organization is highly collaborative and meeting intensive. So in moving into that new role, that combination was really tough for me. So in looking inwardly, the self-awareness aspect of it was I realized I could not treat everything coming at me and everything I needed to do with equal importance. So it was about doing a better job planning my week, planning each day within the week, blocking out time for those critical, Steel for Speed Recovery, quadrant 2 activities that need to get done.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? You have to manage your time with intention. Being the CEO of a fast growth company or any company requires that you be involved in a lot of the different teams, the strategies, and have the vision to direct the team where needed. You also have to be the leader that can connect with them one-on-one or maybe in small teams to give them the feedback they need, the confidence, so that they can own their projects. Today, we're going to be looking at optimizing your time with the CEO of Kenway Consulting. He is Matt Kueker. Matt shares with us the one strategy that he's done, actually those in two, but you really will probably get some insight around this because having the right metrics to measure the team and measure the company on is something that can align people together. We talk about why that's important inside today's episode. We also look at the value of saying no and about not everything has equal importance. Then we dive in part two to look at what's really going on inside of Matt's schedule and what he's working on. He's working on a few different things, but one of the things that we actually came up with was what was missing in his schedule, his day-to-day, that would allow him to be more effective in the meetings and actually cancel some of those meetings if they weren't appropriate for him or he wasn't prepared to be there. So all of that inside today's episode with Matt Kueker, CEO of Kenway Consulting. Hey, Matt.
Gene, how are you? It's good to see you again.
I am excited to have you here. I am, this series on Optimize Your Time is something I'm really excited about and appreciate you being a part of it. Before we dive into this, talking about time and what you're doing to optimize it, I'd love you to tell us about Kenway Consulting.
Sure. Kenway Consulting is a high-growth management technology consulting company. Operations based in Chicago. We have an office in Scottsdale, Arizona as well. And we serve enterprise clients across multi-industries. You can think of us as a higher value middle market alternative to Big Five consulting. Large technology transformations, a lot of work in building data warehouses, hubs, movement of data, helping our clients make better decisions and optimize their businesses.
Well, that means you've got to be on the cutting edge of not only technology, but also how do you lead people? Is that fair?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I could say all of our projects, while most of the conversation may revolve around what technology are you going to use and how you implement it, no technology will work unless you've got the people and processes also aligned.
Well, Matt, we came here because you're the CEO of Kenway Consulting. You've grown fast over the years. And as with that, it comes a lot of pressure, a lot of other things that you're pulled into. But optimizing your time is just such an important thing. So before we get into your one strategy, tell us about your time before that one strategy kind of hit. Like, what were you feeling before you put that into place?
Sure. I would say, so I became, it was really a multi-year journey. Over our growth, beginning in 2018, I was promoted to managing director. Still had our founder was CEO, so I had quite a bit I can lean on him. And, there was a division of labor and responsibilities. I had grown, like most consultants, I think, through delivery. And then I stood up our first business development and marketing organization. So when I moved into managing director, and then also CEO, but I would say because I had about a year and a half or 2 years in that MD position, the transition to CEO was actually easier for me. I was quite overwhelmed because while I was super busy before, I now had such more breadth of my areas of accountability and responsibility. and many of them were new. As I said, I grew up in delivery, kind of self-taught sales and business development, but I had never been exposed to the HR, which is critically important aspects of our business, less so in the finance and accounting space as well. So I had all of these new areas flying at me all at once. I felt overwhelmed, and I would say, after a couple months in the job, feeling incredibly busy, but less impactful. And I knew I needed to make some changes.
So that's the setup to this. And I've been asking the same question to everyone. What is the one strategy that's made the most impact in optimizing your time as a CEO?
Well, I'll cheat a bit and say two.
Okay.
I think the first thing I would advise everyone is to take a hard look in the mirror and practice self-awareness. And I think it's awareness of oneself as well as your organization. And I would say what I learned or I realize is I'm both a rescuer and a pleaser. And our organization is highly collaborative and meeting intensive. So in moving into that new role, that combination was really tough for me. So in looking inwardly, the self-awareness aspect of it was I realized I could not treat everything coming at me and everything I needed to do with equal importance. So it was about doing a better job planning my week, planning each day within the week, blocking out time for those critical, to steal from Stephen Covey, quadrant 2 activities that need to get done, and then having white space to deal with inevitably, the things that will come up. From an organizational perspective, we had to implement also just some more organizational maturity. We furthered our corporate planning process. We got greater alignment within our management team. And I think what that allowed us to do is I could lead, and they, quite frankly, can lead with more intent and not be as involved in the day-to-day of every part of our business that's happening, move more things to 360-degree scorecards. We've got 12 core KPIs, much more through internal status reporting, as opposed to getting together and meeting about every decision that needs to be made about every project going on.
Let me pause right there for a second. I see a lot of companies that are meeting heavy and they want to create something else, scorecards, OKRs. You mentioned a few things that you've done there with KPIs. When you guys decided to do that, when I work with clients, it's really iterative. Like they don't get it right the first time. It's like, okay, well, we need something better here. Is that kind of the process you guys went through?
Absolutely. I worked with our head of operations, and I couldn't have said it better. It's quite frankly been a 3-year journey that I would say, and it never ends, but I would feel like from the pieces that I knew were on the project plan, so to speak, in 2018, I feel like we'll just get to the end of those this year with our annual planning process we're wrapping up right now for next year. And that final leg of the marathon is actually not only achieving alignment amongst our leadership team and their individual organizations, but we're going to get that alignment across and through all employees this year.
So at the end of the day, if you're pulled to a lot of meetings, having the snapshot of the KPIs and whatever else you're measuring across these different teams, has that really reduced your need for meetings?
I think the KPIs have, to an extent, because the big thing they do is we are all in alignment on what makes our business tick, right? If we are doing well in these 13 key areas, we know, or more specifically where we're not, we know that's where we need to focus. And I think the important thing is when you get that alignment, not only amongst leadership, but with employees, we can better funnel scarce resources to the areas that need them. So I would like to say in the past, internally speaking, not for our clients, but for our internal projects over the course of a year, we might do 28 things, very average. What we needed to get to was let's do the 8 most important things incredibly well. And that's where we've been striving. And I think we're getting very close.
Now, I know when we talked a few weeks ago, Matt, you talked about the one strategy that made the biggest difference for you is learning to say no. We haven't covered that today. So I want to make sure we put a little bit of a time on that. Mm-hmm. As a CEO, I know it's hard to say no to all the things you need to be into or people think you need to be into. So tell us exactly what saying no means to you.
Yeah, it's just understanding that not everything is of equal importance. And the challenge I had, like I said, me personally, I'm a rescuer and a pleaser. So I felt as though I might be offending certain people in the company when they invite me to something and I'm not there. And just learn to gain. The first piece was easy because organizationally we already had great people. So once we had that alignment across our management team, I have no problem, delegating and being quite clear with them that, look, let's lead with intent, lead with objectives. I'm confident you understand my intent. I'm confident you understand the objectives. Let's set a cadence where you keep me in the loop appropriately. From that point forward, as employees, not direct reports would invite me to certain things, and simply explain that I'm not saying no, but fill in name of leadership team member. They're on this, and that's your point of contact. And we're going to be meeting once a month or every 6 weeks or quarterly to make sure I stay appropriately involved. So I think I had a much harder part, not the delegation, but then the actual part of saying no is more of a human thing for me than a business. I didn't want any employee to think that I wasn't valuing their initiative or their ideas as much as others.
I know you didn't say that, so I want to make sure I'm clear with it. It sounds like what you're talking about is you looked at the different meetings you were going to, and then you looked at some of the meetings where you've got, what, I don't really need to be there because I know that whoever is kind of leading that team or that initiative or that project, I feel like they've got it. In fact, the words that I would use is I'm going to let them own it so that anything that comes up, they're going to take care of it. They'll let me know when the appropriate time is. Is that sense of ownership, is that kind of something you guys talk about?
Completely. Yes. And I think now, like you said too, that's where it started. And, now with the total alignment amongst employees, my direct reports are able to do that now as well, much more effectively than they were 2 or 3 years ago, just like myself.
Let me break in here for a second. I just want to remind you that if you love what you're hearing today, and if you want to keep getting these episodes, then you can subscribe through iTunes, but you could also go to our website and subscribe. You'll get some summaries of this each week. The episodes really are powerful if you want to be a better leader, you want to be stronger, more confident, and a visionary leader for your team. Just go to genehammett.com/subscribe. When you go there, it's absolutely free for you to put in your email so that you can keep getting these updates and let us stay in touch with you. Just go to genehammett.com/subscribe. Now back to the interview. Here's the thing about it, and I have this conversation a lot with my clients too. They want someone to own it, and then they will say that they're sort of a micromanager, but not really. And they want their executive, the CFO, to own all the reports and all the stuff that's coming out of it, for example. And I'll ask them if they're modeling what ownership really looks like with that person. And most of the time they have to look and say they're not. It's really kind of an irony between the CEO and whoever their direct reports are. I want to appreciate you for sharing these strategies with us. Having those right scorecards to allow you to tune in to what's going on in the team is a very important part of optimizing your time, but also saying no to meetings that you just shouldn't be into. So I'm going to switch into part 2 of this conversation, which is, Matt, if you were thinking about what you're going to do differently and show up differently in 2021, what's that one thing as it relates to your time that you want to do differently?
The outcome that I want to achieve is again, whether it's a board meeting or a large client presentation, prospect pitch, or one of the very important, and urgent things that pops up, my goal is to be appropriately in the moment for every single interaction with every individual with whom I come into contact. I just want to have the maximum impact for every hour of my day. And I think that's a continued evolution of some of the strategies and tactics that we've just discussed previously in the conversation.
So I'm writing this down: maximum impact for every moment in the day. And I know that we had talked earlier, so I want to kind of bring you back to that and see. I know there's a relationship here, but you wanted to create more white space in your calendar. When you think about moving forward, when you think about white space, what exactly would you do with that white space?
For being a still relatively small but rapidly growing professional services firm, I feel like a part of my job, part of the CEO's job, is always going to be business development. Like I told you, that was the function outside of my client practice. That was the function that I was doing before I became promoted to managing director and eventually CEO. And that was the one very impactful area that I saw erode, from being a good chunk of my time to very little of it. And I've increased it some, but that is the area where I've got white space that I can sit and think critically and, put my plan of attack together and how I'm going to go about reaching out to people. That's what I need to make sure I continue to focus on in my individual contribution area.
So that's a little different than I expected to hear. This is the coaching portion of this series. And so I want to kind of ask you, I'm going back to something you had said. I'm going to have maximum, output for the time every day. And this white space, is it really business development, like getting the next deal? Or is it something bigger than that, like strategic partnerships or something that really would change the dynamics of the company?
No, absolutely. And I probably spoke too narrowly. Certainly, again, we don't have full-time business development as of yet. We haven't made, that investment. So being, one of a small handful of individuals that used to dedicate a good amount of time to it, I do think my individual contribution is important, but certainly, and something that we're actually talking about, it's one of our high priority projects to start next year, is enabling others to also understand how to do that, to get good at doing it. The strategic partnerships, we do have an organization we call Capability Service Leadership that owns that. So I feel as though that type of activity through the KPIs and mutual understanding of priorities and where we're focused in those areas, that's pretty well under control.
I guess I'm a little surprised that you don't have a dedicated sales team, being around 50 employees. I know you've got a lot of frontline, technologists and strategists that serve the clients. Is that something that you plan to have on the team is these sales reps?
It's something that we're constantly working on and tweaking and pivoting in certain areas. At some point in size, it likely it's inevitable.
Yeah.
The challenge is, at what point do you make that investment? And, I've done a lot of reading. I know you mentioned last time I'm part of a Vistage group. I also know that likely is going to come with finding the right person or the right people.
Yep.
It's going to come with some trial and error, significant investment. So when that will happen, I can't say. But again, we're always looking to improve, change our means. And again, I think getting more and more people that understand our philosophy and our approach in how we go to market, I think can add quite a bit of fuel as well.
So we've been dancing around all the reasons or what you would do actually with this time. What is the real struggle you have with putting time on your calendar for white space kind of thinking and all the strategic work you just described? Is there a challenge?
There is, and that I need to find more of it. I've for the one thing that needs to get done every day, I've gotten there. I've also learned about myself. I'm a morning person, so I'm got to a point where the hours from 7 to 9 a.m. each day, I have got that for the most important thing I need on that day. That typically, to your point before about maximum impact leverage, if you will, that's not, as an example, keeping up with my own business development relationships. So I think the next point is when you fill a lot of the rest of the day with certain meetings, the white space is only accommodating truly those things that warrant my attention that aren't planned the day or week before. So the challenge I have is likely getting from the 2 hours to something greater, or greater understanding of what I can continue to delegate and say no.
I'm envisioning your calendar right now. I love the fact that you have the 7 to 9. I call that the genius hours. When you do your best work, your best thinking. I'm an early morning person too, so I actually get a little bit anxious when I'm not working during that time, and so I know to protect it. You're nodding like you understand. Oh, yeah. Because once it's gone, and then we get on with other stuff. When you think about the white space, is this something that you actually schedule on your calendar now?
Largely, yes. 7 to 9. If I would say, as I plan my week, I probably go in 3 out of 5 days. I have the 7 and 9 a.m. hours blocked on my calendar. Something
So,
else I started doing is I've color coded as I'm, again, continuing to look inwardly and understand where am I spending my time. I've got 3 general colors, high impact, I'm okay with it. And, red, typical red, amber, green, and red are things where, in retrospect, just didn't need to be there. I wasn't 100% impactful.
I've talked about color coding my schedule too. It's such a game changer to be able to look at it in a glance and say, how much am I spending on clients? How much am I spending on new business? How much am I spending on my team?
Mm-hmm.
And how much I spend on the podcast as well. The thing I want to really kind of wrap us around, Matt, is if you want to create more white space, a lot of times it's not that 7 to 9 period that you were talking about getting the one thing done. It's you talked about the quadrant 2 stuff is the important stuff. Your 7 and 9 is probably your most urgent stuff. Is that accurate? Or
no, that I would put in important, less urgent. It
okay,
really is
perfect.
more forward thinking. I wouldn't characterize it all as necessarily strategic, but certainly high impact.
Okay. So you've got a lot of the things I've actually worked with my clients on. So I'm going to take you next level. What is the real issue there? Do you want more of that time, or do you want to spend that time for more high value stuff?
I'd say it's 2. I don't have a problem with that time. What I would like to get to is, as things are coming up every single day, which they do, not lose any of that time. And in fact, I'd like a bit more of it, but really also to be able to be highly impactful, as I can, as everything is flying around my calendar intraday. And oftentimes, I find myself coming in cold to things, and it's not as impactful. Sometimes it's about mindset, right? Context shifting.
Yep.
But I need to get to a point where I can balance all of those, and in my opinion, handle better the things that do come up in real time.
So I'm kind of picking up that you need some more clear rules around how you structure your day. Whether it's one of the things you just talked about was, I want to go into the meeting prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that you're probably scheduling in right now. Is that clear?
No. I mean, unless there's, I would say it's only, preparation of these big board meetings, large presentations. Otherwise, no scheduled prep for those types of things.
Let's put the spotlight on that for a second, because I think that could be a game changer for you, because this is an area where you're probably showing up. I read the book Principles by Ray Dalio. Have you read that?
No, I have heard of it though.
It's one of my #1 articles on Inc. It just continues to get massive page views about transparency. But inside that, he tells the story of a fellow employee, not a peer, not on an executive team, but someone that's like front line, said, Ray, you didn't show up today completely prepared for today's meeting. And the reason I share that with you is because he allowed the sense of transparency to allow others to give him the feedback that he wasn't aware of. Like, he thought he could just wing it. He thought he's smart. He could just come into the room, but he didn't read the prospectus. He didn't read the data and the graphs. So all the questions were catching him up. And so this junior employee comes back and says, you could have showed up more prepared. I'm giving the short version of this. So you're feeling a little bit of that now. Like, you would like to show up a little bit more prepared with whatever the KPIs, the data, the scorecards, or maybe it's just where this project is. Let me look at the CRM and see where this whatever is going. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Is the best way to do that in like early in the morning, or maybe right before you go to the meeting? Do you see you doing that for the day across everything, or just having 5 minutes before you go into the meeting, or is it more than 5 minutes or something like that?
It could be a combination. I think myself, it would likely be the evening before, or the morning, that morning. Now that you're mentioning this, that would need to be a two-way street. There's a lot of meetings that pop up that have a relatively, it's hard to even tell what the topic is based on the title. So I think having, at least some semblance of agendas, for every meeting before would be quite helpful in that regard.
I had on here Cameron Herold talk about his book Meetings Suck. And the real behind that is meetings don't suck. We suck at holding meetings. And one of the things he says is no agenda, no attenda. And this is again, goes back to the rules of having more effective meetings. If you really value making the most out of the time that you're working and your team's working, having that agenda that's very clearly articulating the objective of today's meeting, the outcome we're hoping to decide on, any data that's related to it. Do you feel like that should be a standard part of being able to put something on your calendar?
Yeah, it should. Absolutely. Like I said, probably 50% have that.
Yep.
Certainly recurring meetings, the bigger ones, but not all of them.
How prepared would you be to the meeting if you had that on 100% of your meetings coming in? And then how prepared would everyone else be? And then how prepared would that make, how effective would that make the meeting?
Yeah, it would be completely binary. I would either be 100% prepared, or I would realize I don't need to be there. So it could even be more effective in that regard in terms of creating white space and being impactful.
So I could read into this, but based on this conversation, what have you realized about the way that these meetings are showing up in your calendar that you can improve to optimize your time?
I'd say even for being more explicit about that requirement of at least a simple agenda, to understand what the point of the meeting is, what we hope to accomplish, would be really helpful. And even for meetings that come up and need to be scheduled intraday, I don't think that would be too big of a leap for our organization, to be honest. And I do think it would be quite helpful.
Do you feel like that you have the kind of organization that would accept this kind of change, or would you get pushback?
No, we would accept this type of change. We say this all the time. Is we need to. I like to say we need to eat our own dog food. We need to take our own medicine. We need to do things as we advise our clients to do things, and we would never schedule a meeting for a client without having a really tight agenda to allow everyone to be completely prepared. So it's simply a matter of taking our own medicine.
It's interesting that you say that. Like externally, we show up differently, right, for our clients and for the outside world. But internally, we get a little bit lax. And there's a phrase that I use in executive coaching is you get what you tolerate. And do you realize what you've been tolerating here internally when it comes to meetings?
No, I do. Yeah, like I said, it's to your point before, and we talked about it. It's iterative. I look at this as just another layer of the management model that we need to introduce and then perfect over time.
So I don't know if we actually got to the heart of this more white space, but what we actually discovered was some of the things that you want to do differently as it relates to looking at your day. And I think having these meetings and having that agenda, having just 2 or 3 things that if you had them on every meeting, you would know whether to attend, or when you did attend, you would be more prepared. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you were able to make that change, is that something you're willing to commit to, or is this just an idea we're kind of tossing around between 2 people?
No, I'm absolutely not only willing, I will commit to it because it just makes a ton of sense. Like I said, we would never schedule something for a client void of an agenda. I think it makes perfect sense, and it won't only help me. I mean, it will help everyone.
I agree. I think that not only would it help you and the people you're in that meeting with, but if this is something that's carried through to all the meetings and all the things that are happening, it makes people be a little bit more intentional about hosting that meeting, why we're there, what that agenda is, what the outcome we're hoping to get, or what we're reviewing, and making sure everyone has the right materials. And if that become a standard, you would probably feel a little bit more effective with the time that you have.
For sure. And I think everybody would.
All right. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up, Matt. I appreciate you being here to talk about optimizing your time. You shared with us some of the things that have already worked. We've discovered one thing that you could actually do to help you feel more optimized as a CEO. So I appreciate you being here on the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Really enjoyed it.
Well, let's wrap up here. I would like to reiterate, when you think about your time, you have to make sure you're spending your time on the most valuable aspects of the business. Because if you're not looking at the strategic, if you're not looking out beyond where you are today, instead of just heads down, you're going to miss that opportunity. What we talked about with Matt today is something that I think all of us struggle with. It's just some fine tunings of how we look at our schedules. And this is something we should always be doing, not just once a year, not just on a podcast with some, podcast host who's an executive coach, but do it all the time. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. If you're looking to up-level as a CEO, make sure you think of me, Gene Hammett. Go get free resources at genehammett.com. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.